Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for watching this presentation. I don't know who and when you will be watching it, but I hope that by that time you will be enjoying the 30th International Colloquium of Gerpisa. My name is Lorenza Monaco. You will probably know me through the Gerpisa network or just through the organization of this colloquium. I work for Gerpisa, but here I'm presenting some work conducted together with my colleague Jason Bell from the University of Johannesburg, to which I'm also affiliated as a senior research associate. So just to give a quick background, this work fits into a broader attempt to shift, to boost the attention within Gerpisa towards the global south, and to also connect growing research on digitalization on the one hand and on global value chains on the other. So here what we do, we engage with theoretical concepts of power and inequality to analyze the potentially growing divides emerging within the transition to a supposed fourth industrial revolution. And we do so from the perspective of two emerging economies. So two countries from the global south, namely South Africa and Thailand. I will here provide a brief summary of our study. Of course, I hope there will be further opportunities to engage more later on. So I will give you a very quick background to this research. I will touch upon the theoretical debate we engage in. I will explain how we tackle these theoretical concepts of power, technological change, and inequality from a global south viewpoint. And then I will shortly dwell upon three types of inequality that we identify as emerging within this transition, that are inter-country inequality, inter-firm inequality, and inequality connected to an employment recomposition. I will finally provide some short concluding thoughts. So in brief, this is a theoretical elaboration of empirical research conducted initially for the South African Industrial Development Think Tank, and then also for the University of Johannesburg, briefly in Thailand in 2018, for a longer time in South Africa in between 2016 and 2021, actually, even now. And that focused broadly on the auto industry, but this specific study had a specific zoom on plastic auto components in South Africa and Thailand. Here, for this presentation, for this article, we select some interviews, we use a selected number of interviews conducted with business associations in South Africa and Thailand in both the plastics and the auto sector. And we also quote three selected case studies from auto component manufacturers, 3 in South Africa, 3 in Thailand. So for an overall number of about 18 interviews. We already produced some papers as part of these studies. I'm here referring to the latest one that is forthcoming. You have the references here. So just quickly, how we want to fit in the theoretical debate. We want to participate to a critical assessment of processes of technological change, analyzing, including an analysis of gains, risks, and undesired effects, and going beyond what Garibaldi and Rinaldini discuss as, for example, technological determinism, so against a linear view of technological change that will equally and evenly affect all actors involved in the process. and also deconstructing what seem to be rather fashionable hypes in relation to fourth industrial revolutions and digital transition. Here, of course, we assume the idea that indeed the digital transition, the fourth industrial revolution, have the potential to create new markets and new jobs. And as some literature points out, to fast track, supposedly fast track the integration of newcomers into global value chains. However, there is an even stronger risk of growing inequalities linked to increasing digital divide and to the uneven access to smart technologies, both within and between countries. Here, we also raise the need to assume a global viewpoint, looking at these processes beyond the strongholds of advanced industries in the global north, looking at what's happening in the global south, and analyzing the specific impact of this process of technological change at different levels, namely country, sector, firm level, and in terms of employment trends. We here engage with different debates on power, technological change, and inequality in the context of global value chains, analyzing how value addition, power, innovation, technological capabilities are still concentrated in advanced production nodes, either countries or multinational lead firms, and how this affects possibilities for technological upgrading and participation into value chains in countries belonging to the global south. We also look at how power asymmetries determine an uneven capture of value and an uneven extraction of rents, with reference to the auto value chain, linking, as I will explain, different typologies of power with the three main actors, stakeholders involved in the auto industry. Multinational companies, multinational lead firms, state and suppliers, and defining the interaction between them as a bidirectional and simultaneous exercise of power. Again, we link to a view of technological upgrading considered as neither linear nor additive, but determined by the power to access these so-called smart technologies. In this specific paper, we look at how power determines technological inequality. So we specifically look at technological inequality through the ability to influence technological upgrading across a value chain. As I mentioned, we look at specific three different typologies of power as initially used and defined by Phillips in 2017, namely market, social, and political power, where market is broadly referred to the possibility to capture value and extract rents, but also to the possibility of certain actors to set standards and determine specifications in the industry. Social power is referred to as the ability to influence public opinion in favor of one's own agenda, and political power refers to all the bargaining relationships that affect the governance within a global value chain, and that also allow certain actors to lobby and to affect the direction taken by the policy process. The interaction between these three types of power and the exercise of the three main types of actors involved in the auto value chain is used to explain that a differential access to technology, differential accumulation of productive capabilities, and the actual prospects for upgrading. Technological inequality is also seen as having direct and indirect explanations. where direct explanations are linked to firm specific capability, technological capabilities. Indirect explanations of technological inequalities inequality are linked to how the standards imposed in the industry by one actor affect the possibilities of upgrading of another actor. Briefly, this is the representation of the power directionality within the auto global value chain as we included in our article from 2021. This is a very schematic representation of the auto value chain in South Africa and Thailand. South Africa is the inverted pyramid you see in the first picture. Thailand is on the other. Quoted and referred to explain one of the ideas of power in the auto value chain as deriving also, as linked also to the extent and the strength of the supplier base, whereby increasing where a larger a narrower supplier base in terms of extent, number of actors, and existing productive capabilities leads to a more uneven power balance between lead firms and suppliers. But I can't get into the details of this explanation. Looking at the three typologies of inequalities that we identify as growing within the transition to a fourth industrial revolution. The first one we analyze is inter-country inequality, building on insights from South Africa and Thailand. And we look at how the uneven transition to fourth industrial revolution is increased, is amplified by the existing global division of labor and industrial specialization in the auto industry, where especially R&D facilities and design capabilities are concentrated in advanced nodes, and weaker nodes of the chain still participate in the auto industry as providers of cheap labor and commodity type of components. We look at how power relations and governance dynamics within local value chains affect investment level policies and overall competitiveness of certain countries. And with specific reference to South Africa and Thailand, we try to explain what places Thailand in a most competitive position in technological terms, so in a more favorable location within this transition to a fourth industrial revolution. And we specifically identify 5 factors that allow Thailand to be in a more favorable situation. And in particular, these are the existing policy frameworks, the investments that have been conducted in terms of clusters, initiatives, the specific multinational state relations, the type of institutional coordination, and the presence of a regional market that allowed Thailand to gain more in terms of technological competitiveness in relation to the Asian market. In terms of inter-firm inequality, we listened to the firms we interviewed that expressed the particular concerns with reference to the access to smart technologies, and we derived some conclusions related to how type, size of firm, and specific location within global value chains affect the technological competitiveness and the access to technology. So for what concerns the firms we interviewed in both countries, they highlighted how, of course, there are potential gains from the use of smart technologies, but there are specific costs that are related to the acquisition of softwares, to the acquisition of new technologies, but also to the training of robots, for example, and the need to invest in new skills. They make these technologies particularly costly for certain firms within the value chain. And so for some firms that don't have sufficient capital and economies of scale and production volumes, the acquisition of smart technologies is particularly costly, and therefore there is a potential increasing gap between them and leaders in the sectors. For what concerns the two countries, we observe that 4IR technologies are already better integrated in Thailand as opposed to South Africa, where barriers and trade-offs are higher. Here, the difference between firms that are already advanced in terms of acquisition of smart technologies and the firms that we saw that still have completely manual operations. Briefly, in terms of employment recomposition, we analyze the concept and the possibility of a skill-biased technological change with increasing use of high-skilled workers and technicians, and what this will imply for our countries. Of course, firms we interviewed expressed a particular concern towards this possible labor displacement effects, considering that these are countries with high levels of unemployment and large pools of low-skilled workers. We analyze and reflect on possible not only skills mismatches and labor market imbalances that might derive from the transition, but also we look at the potential growing power divide between workers with different skill levels, with increasing vulnerability of low-skilled workers that might be further squeezed and lose bargaining power, and increasing monitoring and surveillance allowed by new technologies of low-skilled workers. At the same time, we consider potential beneficial effects and divides in between workers, for example, employed on the assembly line and workers employed at managerial levels. For example, we discussed how the access to the larger use of smart technologies during COVID allowed the managers to telework as opposed to production workers bound to the factory facilities, and this also increased the exposure and the risks for production workers more than for managers and high-skilled workers. So there are different divides and different power imbalances that can be linked to the acquisition of smart technologies. I can't continue on this, but just to provide some concluding thoughts. Again, we go back to the need to carefully assess the transition, the digital transition, the move to suppose the fourth industrial revolution, looking at increasing digital divides and inequalities between countries, firms, and workers, with specific and particular attention to what's happening in the global South. We can derive conclusions on how power and the distribution of power and specific governance settings in global value chains determine the access to smart technologies, and to think of the way forward, we highlight the need to bridge the digital divide and counter increasing technological inequalities by guaranteeing not only broader access to technologies, but also by supporting small and less technologically advanced firms, and paying particular attention to retraining and integrating low-skilled workers who might suffer the most. Otherwise, it would be difficult to even think of just digital transition. These are some of the references we used. Thank you very much for your attention. Just to conclude, in case you are working on similar topics and are interested in some of the points raised in this presentation, consider getting in touch, because through the Gerpisa working group on emerging economies and global value chains, we will develop joint publications, and we will organize events on these topics in the coming academic year. Thank you very much. I hope you are and you will be enjoying the colloquium. Bye.